With hundreds of games to choose from and a value of over $7,000 worth of games, I've decided to compile the best 50 plus Xbox Game Pass games you can play this 2023. I'm Sonny, your host at Xbox Central, and we'll start this off with none other than Deathloop, that has you playing as Colt on a mission to assassinate 8 key targets within 24 hours. And if you happen to fail, you have to start completely over, but each attempt has you learning new approaches to break the time loop. That means finding new paths, new weapons, new upgrades, new intel, all with the approach of learning the best path forward. One key aspect of this game is the player versus player, where someone can play your rival Juliana and completely disrupt your single player experience. Meanwhile, you can do the same thing to them. This portion of the game is optional though. You can simply just have the AI take over if you don't want to engage in PvP, but overall this is a well-renowned game with a Metacritic score of 87 and is easily one of the very best on this list. Now, the original classics of the Mass Effect series have been remastered to 4K and have received some gameplay changes, and that's significant because the first game came out all the way back in 2007, and I think it's safe to say it's one of the most incredible gaming journeys across a trilogy that you can experience as you relive the story of Commander Shepard and his crew going across the galaxy trying to save humanity. This is a full-blown, high-octane, intense story where your choices matter, and what you decide can dictate what happens in the end. I've had the chance to relive this journey yet again. It's just one of those classic gaming stories that really separates itself from like a movie or a TV show, because you're the one that's in the driver's seat, not just the grand choices that will affect the entire galaxy that you make, but even the small ones of who's even allowed to be in your crew, who you get to romanticize, and a lot more. This is one of the best franchises of all time, and one that if you just haven't had a chance to play, I'm just kind of jealous of you because you're in for a hell of a ride. So Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy is an action-adventure title that has you riding across space as you play as Star-Lord, leading this ragtag group of Guardians. I've actually gotten the pleasure of really diving into this one, and the gameplay was just absolutely smooth. The visuals were gorgeous, and sometimes I honestly would just sit back and take it, especially on the Xbox Series X. But the two things that I absolutely just couldn't get enough of with Guardians of the Galaxy was the story. I thought there was a lot of freaking hilarious moments and a lot of humor all spread out throughout the game, and I have to mention the insanely awesome 80s retro music, and just the entire soundtrack is just brilliant. This is really a gem of a game with tens of thousands of positive user reviews, and easily one of the highlights on this list. Another game that I've gotten the pleasure of enjoying is Death Stranding. Here you play as Sam Bridges, a courier delivering important cargo across the United States, only there's been a supernatural collaticism called Death Stranding that has driven all of humanity underground, leaving a wasteland and barren environment. Meanwhile, everything is plagued by like these weird creatures called BTs that age everything rapidly. It's a strange story like you've never heard. The game itself is going to be something like you've never experienced. The character you play in, Sam, is tasked with essentially saving America, and the gameplay, put it simply, is just like a lot of you walking and delivering packages in this open world. Meanwhile, you're trying to survive. You're going to come across a lot of different landscapes as well, like waterfalls, snowy mountains, dense forests, lots of raging rivers. But despite the big open world, the story here, guys, is just magnificent. It's one of those games that can be kind of hard to explain because there's just really nothing out there like this to compare it to, but it does have elements of management with your inventory and just kind of figuring out the best path, whether that's sneaking, some fighting, and just really taking in the story. Set in a mythical world of the Greek gods, Immortals Fenyx Rising puts you in the shoes of a mortal who embarks on a wild journey to rescue his brother from the evil Typhon. The game features a gorgeous fantasy world, an immersive story with great narration, some really thrilling fast action combat. There's tons of puzzles in this game, so if you aren't into that, this might not be your thing, but if you are, you're gonna love it. The game also features a ton of different weapons, from bows to arrows to deadly swords, some decent customization with your character, and really, guys, some pretty insane boss fights that I've enjoyed quite a bit. They kind of remind me of like the MMORPGs, boss fights like the World of Warcraft and such. If you guys are looking for an open world fantasy title, you're gonna want to look no further than this. Disney's Dreamlight Valley is a game that, when played, will be pretty similar to a game you might all know in Animal Crossing, only in the Disney world. In this life sim adventure game, you'll be building up your own island, your very own home, all while also creating your very own unique character, and everything in this game is pretty customizable. You'll also be engaging in iconic Disney characters and taking on a myriad of quests from them with the hopes of convincing them to join your Disney island. You'll also be visiting various Disney landmarks from the famous movies like Moana's Island and a lot more. The game also features some cool stuff you can do, things like fishing, mining, cooking, crafting, even planting crops. It's a game really chock full of tons of activities, lots of wonders to explore, and of course, lots of magical things to discover. So I really wanted to add Rainbow Six Extraction to this list, not because it really does anything new or super exciting, but I really think it's a solid game. A game where you jump in with you and 2 other players, and you start taking on objectives and working together with your unique operatives. The game does draw heavily from its brother Rainbow Six Siege, but that's kind of where it ends. The game has just crazy amount of operatives who all bring unique skills to the table, mixed with the loadouts that you can customize. Plus the game can get pretty difficult, so communication with your squad will be very paramount to winning, but if you don't want to run in a team, you can absolutely go solo. Either way, it's a pretty high quality game even here in 2023, and one that I just wanted to recommend on this list. Boy, a game that I've poured hundreds of hours into is Crusader Kings, and keep in mind, typically a game like this is not my jam. It looks complicated, it looks confusing, but I want you to imagine this. You're a king and you're taking over the world and you're succeeding, but then you have a son who backstabs you, sleeps with your multiple wives, yes, you have multiple wives, and then takes you out in your sleep. That's actually happened to me and I loved it. It's a larger than life simulation game that has you guiding your dynasty to pretty much do whatever you want. You can take over the world through your bloodline and through the generations. You can take over all of Europe if that's the only thing you want to do, or just take over America, or just rule your small little nation. You can literally do whatever you want. It's a sandbox game. You can be a benevolent king or completely cruel to everyone. Like I said, you can do whatever you want in what I'd say is a quite addicting game. Don't be fooled by the aesthetics. This is one of the most fun games I've played over the past years, and you'd be surprised how much detail is in this game. Oh, and let's not forget, it's completely optimized for consoles with gamepad controllers. I know Assassin's Creed Odyssey released back in 2018, but I still think it's one of the best in the series as it combines everything that's made the franchise great. It's got some decent story, it's got great action, combat, and gameplay, and you can be this stealthy assassin or you can take on things with brute force. You'll also be exploring a vast open world where you can customize your ship as you travel through it. There's tons of loot to upgrade and special abilities to acquire. This is easily one of the most deep Assassin's Creed games today, one I can personally vouch for, and a game with the potential of 100+ hours with all the content it has to offer. If you haven't tried this game in the Assassin's Creed franchise, I highly recommend it. In the game Valheim, you're getting a brilliant survival exploration sandbox game based on Vikings lore where you build your way up through almost a tier system as you gather resources, you build your home, you craft weapons and gear, and then you take on some pretty epic bosses, and every time you take out one of these bosses, you unlock even more stuff to build, craft, and explore. It's not an annoying survival game where you have to constantly feed yourself and you have to micromanage too much, and I think this is the part that's really appealing. Plus the exploring in this game is super satisfying as you'll just find random caves, random homes, you'll build sailboats across the high seas. I personally love this game. It is very playable solo, or you can absolutely jump in with buddies like I have and have a pretty wild and epic adventure. In Plague Tale Requiem, you'll be continuing following the story of Amicia and Hugo as they attempt to start a new life and help Hugo with his curse. Now, Requiem tells a pretty intense story of survival, but this game is really bringing it to another level, guys. It's got stunning visuals and the gameplay is just awesome. Now, while this is an action-adventure title, most times than not, you're actually looking to not get into fights head-on like other games. Here, you'll want to use a variety of tools at your disposal to survive throughout and get the upper hand. The game takes about 15 to 20 hours to compete, and so far, it's been one of the best titles that came out back in 2022 and one of the most awesome games on this list that really brings that next gen goodness. Now, if you're a fan of JRPG titles, Persona 5 is a great one as you play a high school student in Tokyo by day, but by night you wear the mysterious mask of the Phantom Thief as you try to save the world. Now, this game has a lot of things happening. During the day, you're going to be doing your daily activities, things like getting a job to earn money, you're going to be doing daily quests, but when you're donning that mask at night and you're going to be engaging in some some pretty wild stories. You're going to be stopping some really corrupt people, and I gotta say, the combat in this game, the turn-based combat, is well done. There's also a deep story here with multiple alternate endings depending on your choices throughout the game, and if you guys are new to JRPGs, I really think this is a great one to start with. Even without playing the previous Persona games, I think this is a solid base, and this ends up being one of the best games to have dropped on Game Pass last year, and it's got to be one that I recommend here in 2023. Now, Ghost Recon Wildlands is a game that dropped all the way back in 2017, but to this day, it's still one of the best military-style shooters available to play. You're dropped in Bolivia, where you or your team is set out to dismantle an extremely dangerous hostile cartel. Now, mission by mission, you'll tackle all the aspects of the cartel's operation with the hopes of taking out the leader, featuring a full open world capable of being completed with you or up to 3 players, or you just solo. But one aspect I love is the almost sim-like experience you get with an ops team with you or your buddies or your AI teammates, where you all sync shots and really coordinate some stealthy takedowns, and you take down some really big operations. The gunplay is just so fluid, the story is pretty interesting, and for me this game is a pretty good one on this list. So Jurassic World Evolution 2 is a title that I've actually poured quite a few hours into when it released back in 2019. It's all about creating your own dino park within the Jurassic Park world, and the game really does get super in-depth, especially in the sandbox mode. You'll be creating your park from the ground up, you'll be setting things up for tourists, you'll be setting up hotels, restaurants, the enclosures, the viewing booths for people to watch the dinosaurs, and you'll even be capturing the dinosaurs in the wild yourself as you set your strike team to go out hunting. One funny aspect of this game is if you mess up at building, you can actually watch all your dinos escape and then kill your workers and all your tourists all around. I don't know why that made me laugh. I guess I'm just a little evil. Either way, it's a truly wild game, and it has an addicting loop, and it's a great management sim game set in a Jurassic Park world. Now, Lost in Random is an action-adventure game with a very unique fantasy story that has you playing as a girl trying to save her beloved sister, but you have this companion in Dicey, and essentially it's a dice companion who you'll engage with in battles using the dice and the roll of the dice that'll determine the unique gameplay mechanics that will play out in your combat. My goodness, that was a mouthful, but it's a very unique and cool thing. Since the game's launch, it has had amazing user reviews, a Metacritic score of 78, and it's been a beloved game with kind of a unique package. I'm guessing by now most of you know about the game Stardew Valley, but in case you don't, this is by far one of the best farming simulators out there, and for many good reasons. You can indulge yourself in a ton of different activities spread across the world. You'll be meeting new characters, you'll explore new professions, or you could just live a simple life at your farm, doing normal farming things and raising animals and just doing a lot more. While the game is super good at going solo and doing your own thing, you can actually experience this one with your friends either locally or online. The game still remains the same, which is awesome. And if you just haven't had a chance to experience one of the best farming sim games, even if you're not into this genre, I just couldn't recommend more. This is one of the best games of all time, and yes, it's an indie game. So I've been a big fan of the Back 4 Blood game, and it draws its inspirations from Left 4 Dead. It's a 4-player cooperative action multiplayer shooter where you fight your way through the campaign, working together and trying to survive the zombies. Put it quite simply, the gameplay for this is just really fun, and at the end of the day, if you just want a really mindless shooter that's just plain chaotic, that's really what Back 4 Blood brings, and for that, I absolutely love it. So this is my absolute favorite co-op game of all time, and I have played them all. It Takes Two is one of those that is just incredible. Winner of the Game of the Year in 2021. You take on one of 2 characters in either Cody or May, who get turned into dolls by a magic spell, but they gotta find a way back into the real world. Now, put it simply, the cooperative nature of having to work with someone in what is gonna be the most unique environments and gameplay elements you'll ever see due to the co-op nature is just mind-blowing. When I booted this game, I had no clue it was this good or if it was even going to be good, period, and honestly, I came away nowhere near shocked that it had won Game of the Year in 2021. Do yourself a favor, if you have a friend to play with online or couch, you have to get in and give this game a shot. A game that is fast-paced, it's brutal, and insanely hard. That's what I would describe as Doom Eternal. If you guys want your gamer skills put to the test, this is the game to do it. I've been a big fan of this title since it came out years ago. It's just mindless action where you do at times have to outsmart your enemy, but one awesome thing is how Doom Eternal really showcases how good the Xbox Series X is. Even if you don't have a Series X or S, this is still one of the best games to have released the past few years, and it really shows what next-gen gaming is all about. So Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order tells the story of an abandoned abandoned Padawan who must complete his training in the Force, well, to stay alive from, you guessed it, none other than the Empire. Easily one of the best story-based adventure titles on this list, and with some awesome third-person action gameplay that just at times could be mystifying. You take on this Padawan with the hopes of developing new abilities and of course master the art of the lightsaber, all to survive. It's such a great story, some of the best cinematic gameplay with the lightsaber action, and honestly one of the best story-based games on Game Pass and on this list. So Gears 5 in 2023 is a well-rounded and pretty overall awesome Xbox exclusive featuring a single-player campaign, several hub worlds you can explore freely, an amazing fast, fluid, and fun gameplay. But when you're done with the single player, you even have the option of getting in some cooperative online play, but there's even awesome full-fledged player versus player competitive modes, as well as things like Team Deathmatch, King of the Hill, and a lot more. So if you guys are looking for an awesome Xbox shooter exclusive, Gears 5 is a good one to play. So one of the few player versus player games on this list, Rainbow Six Siege, even after being released so many years down the road, is still one of the most popular first-person tactical shooters on the market, and I'd argue it's one of the best of all time. Now with lots of operators to continuously choose from, the gameplay is still fantastic even in 2023, and if you're really looking for something that still has tons of players playing today and you're looking for just that best competitive experience in a first-person package, you have it here with Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Siege. The Hitman trilogy games on Game Pass can literally offer hundreds of hours, tackling mission by mission, which you have your objectives to take out key people. You can do this in a variety of ways, and all of it has the potential to keep you engaged for a long time. That's because each mission has different objectives, and returning to those missions can have you tackling those in multiple ways, which is why the game has tons of replayability. Believe it or not, to this day I have friends who are pouring dozens and dozens of hours into this weekly because the updates are always happening, the gameplay is always fresh, and there's really nothing else like it on the market, making it a pretty unique title. Now, one of my favorite fighting games of all time has to be on this list, and that's Mortal Kombat 11. The reason why it's one of my favorites, put it frankly, guys, I don't like fighting games. It's actually one of my least favorite genres, but Mortal Kombat 11 sucked me into its story, and it's just completely wild and worth a playthrough, just even if you do that alone. The gameplay and fighting mechanics are also extremely smooth and very gory, but in a good way. This game has converted me into loving fighting games a lot more, and that's no faint praise. Brutal fatalities, featuring tons of different modes, and honestly there just isn't much not to love with this game, so give it a try even if you're not a fan of the fighting genre like I am, because I guarantee you'll love this one. Over the years, Fallout 4 is a game that's really come into its own these days, bringing the open world post-apocalyptic gameplay to your door, mixed with an insane amount of story, quest, dialogue to experience. This now classic game, after many years later, now stands the test of time with tons of DLC to dive into, tons of story content, a huge post-apocalyptic world to explore full of lots of goodies spread out everywhere. This has been my favorite franchise of the last decade. There's really honestly never been a better time to jump into this one, and of course the anticipation for future potential exclusive Fallout Xbox titles. Guys, there's hundreds of hours here to get into, tons of stories to follow through, and if you haven't dived into Fallout 4, do yourself a huge favor, get in there and enjoy one of my favorite games of the past decade. Alright, it's hard for me not to mention State of Decay 2 in every list going forward. This is one of my favorite games of all time, and heck, as you saw at the opening of this video, I even have a shirt, a game that 4 years later, or should I say 5 years later, is still getting updates while they are working on the newest State of Decay 3. This is one of the fewest sandbox PvE zombie games on the market. That means you play pretty much on your own. The game has increased in difficulty over the years with big updates, and has you almost at the edge of your seat at all times, mixed with permadeath characters and your community having to survive the apocalypse, managing your base of operations, looting across big sprawling maps just to survive, and yeah, there is a little bit of multiplayer if you want to do that as well. This is still the best zombie post-apocalyptic game to this day, and it's a must play on this list. So I want to go ahead and put the entire Yakuza series on this list. There's quite a few games on here on Game Pass, but if you want to start somewhere, start with Yakuza Like a Dragon. That kind of gives you a chance to jump into this uniquely crafted game that takes you to the world of crime lords, where you have to take on a plethora of tasks to progress through a pretty twisting story. Like a Dragon is an absolute thriller for anyone who craves action-packed fight scenes with a great story and some pretty unforgettable characters as well. This game really checks it all, and it kind of gives you like a nice overview of the entire series, just in case you decide to really get into all of it. And the cool thing is, all the stories from all the games and all the gameplay is something I've gotten to experience, and guys, it's just an amazing franchise and one that I couldn't recommend more. Since Hollow Knight's release back in 2017 from Team Cherry, the game has gone on to sell millions and millions of copies, and that's for a good reason. What's been kind of dubbed the best Metroidvania of all time, and I don't think there's a ton of people who'll argue with me on that. It has this classic side-scrolling action, fast-paced action combat, some of the most beautiful, well-done 2D art style you'll ever see in any game. The exploration's quite vast, believe it or not, for a 2D game, and guys, there's just a crap ton of happening with this game. It's insane. If you guys are a fan of indie games and Metroidvanias, Hollow Knight is going to be one that's going to be one of the best on Game Pass to play. So Grounded, as of last year, finally hit its 1.0 update, and if you're not familiar, it's one of the more unique takes on their survival genre, as you play like these little tiny humans in a backyard full of hordes of giant insects. Now, unlike other survival games, Grounded does not have this player versus player thing going on, but it does have the normal survival gameplay mechanics you'll be diving into, things like base building and crafting, exploring, and just generally surviving against insanely dangerous insects instead of other players. Now, the game these days has an awesome story campaign that you can dive into, and of course set in a unique world. There's also plenty of weapons to collect and armor pieces to discover, and some really cool unique fights that you won't see anywhere else. Fights like with a deadly giant mantic boss, and then the boss battles themselves is just in general absolutely epic. Not only that, this game is completely solo if that's the way you want to go, or you can absolutely play with some buddies, but either way you don't want to miss one of the most unique survival games pretty much ever made. I have to say, Hellblade Senua is a game, when I beat it some years ago, man, did it leave an impression on me that I just can't forget. The game tells a story of a young Viking warrior who goes through Helheim, a literal hell of place, just so her lover's soul could rest. The game truly really pushes the limit with how the story unfolds and how Senua's journey connects the players to the protagonist and the way her actions and her suffering affects you. On top of that, Hellblade has really some of the best visuals and environment settings that really immerse you in a way that no other game ever has, at least for me. The game's no less than an emotional drama with one of the most satisfying endings in gaming history, and with the sequel literally right around the corner, there's going to be no better time to experience a game that I think is absolutely timeless, and one that's going to be good even decades from now. Now, I'm not usually a Lego guy, but man, Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga is a special game, especially since I am a Star Wars fan. This is a game that I'm into. It dropped all the way in 2021 to some great reviews, and that's because it really takes you on a ride on all the iconic stories and moments through the Star Wars films. And make no mistake, there is a lot to play through here, with over 300 playable characters, 23 planets to fully explore in an open world. There just isn't a lot this game doesn't have covered if you guys are a huge Star Wars fan like I am. Not only that, you will have the ability to freely take on quests across planets. You'll embark on an epic story like the full icon lightsaber duels throughout the movies, the battles between the droids, the rebels, and of course the stormtroopers. And man, there's even X-Wing trench run fights, pod racing, and a host of mini games and puzzles just littered throughout this adventure. And of course there is a full-on local co-op as well, so it is enjoyable with all ages from kids to adults. It's no joke when I say there's a lot to dive into with this one, and the good part about this one is that it's just fully on Game Pass to enjoy. So Dusk Falls is gotta be one of the more brilliant Xbox exclusives that dropped back in 2022. The game's a unique interactive drama that really plays out brilliantly like a motion graphic novel. Starting in 1998 with a robbery that's gone wrong in a small town in Arizona, the game has you making decisions for two families whose fate now rests in your hands. With a timeline set across 30 long years, every decision that you make comes with grave consequences for the two families and how they come out of this big mess in the end. The best thing about this game is that each playthrough is going to feel completely different with different choices. It's a must-play title for those who just love a gripping story more than anything. Set in Hope County, Montana, Far Cry 5 takes you on the land of a crazy cult known as Eden's Gate, led by Joseph Seed. Being a Far Cry title, the game is filled to the brim with these like intense gunfights, epic cutscenes, and a vast open world, and pretty much everything that you'd expect to see in a Far Cry game, only this time you get to face more than just a single boss. This crazy cult leader has 3 siblings that you need to fight as separate bosses before facing the big guy. Now, it's not as special as the boss from Far Cry 3 like Vass, but it still makes for a very fun and unique Far Cry experience, especially with the freedom to fight the 3 siblings in any order you like. If you guys haven't played this game already, this is going to be a great time to dive in and just enjoy it free on Game Game Pass. So Road 96 is one of the more unique games on this list. It's a story-rich adventure that takes you on a wild road trip to escape the oppressive rule of your country. The game features a bright and stunningly beautiful art style combined with an equally immersive soundtrack from the 90s, one of my favorite times, and that just makes everything in the game a lot more enjoyable. It's one of those best interactive story-rich games that honestly I got to play for a bit and really enjoyed it. And the thing that I love the most about this game is just the whole road trip is completely procedurally generated, making every playthrough completely different than the other one that you've done before. It's a gripping adventure with exciting exploration, gorgeous visuals, quirky characters, and tons of choices you'll be making across your journey. It's a good one on Game Pass and one I recommend. This game not only exceeded my expectations, but it absolutely blasted right through them. Tunic is a Zelda-like action-adventure title played from an isometric perspective, where the player assumes control of this little warrior fox stuck in a mystical land filled with wild creatures and unexpected surprises. What I find most fascinating about this game, besides the mesmerizing beauty of the world, is that there's just no hand-holding whatsoever. You have to find your way around this vast world by putting your exploration skills to the test without any sort of manual. The game even has its own made-up language that makes everything even more mysterious and cryptic. It's definitely one of those that I think is absolutely worth checking out on Game Pass. Now, coming from the creators of the game Other Waters, Citizen Sleeper is one of my favorite games on this list for many reasons. It's one of the very few games that manages to catch your undivided attention as you dive into a broken world, barely hanging between the balance of hope and despair. Set in a sci-fi world run by lawless factions and archaic alliances, you take control of a digitized human conscience in an artificial vessel, trying your best to just get through the day unscathed. Choose who you want to become in this brutal world on the edge of extinction, and survive the cycle by working hard and making new friends from all walks of life. Citizen Speaker might not look like much at first glance, but guys, once you get started, this game will keep you hooked all the way to the very end. So Hot Wheels Unleashed is one of the most fun and unique racers I've gotten to play over the past couple years, and I can definitely speak firsthand on what an incredible game this is. From the authentic visuals of the Hot Wheel cars that I grew up with as a kid, and then seeing them in the game racing, to some of the most unique tracks and environments you'll ever see in a racer, period. Now, one cool aspect I really love about this game is that when your car takes damage, you actually start to see things like the paint chipping off, and it's almost as if you simulated playing the cars yourself as a kid. And well, I don't know about you guys, but I got destructive with my Hot Wheels cars and crashed them together, so that definitely makes a lot of sense. Not only that though, this game does feature a split screen mode for local multiplayer. You can hop in online also and do some 12-player races. There's also a create your own track mode, and ultimately guys, this is a racer I can safely say is not only great for all ages like kids and adults, but really anybody can just get into this and feed into the nostalgia of some real Hot Wheel racing. This is one of the best racing titles to hit Game Pass. In my opinion, I think you guys will definitely enjoy this if you give it a shot. Now, if you're looking for an absolute thriller and one of the best racers period on Game Pass, I just can't think of a better game than the latest Forza Horizon 5. The game takes the Forza formula to a whole new level with a massive open world that's free to explore in any way you want. You can drift through the chaotic streets of Mexico in some of the most exotic supercars as you just whoosh through lush green jungles, abandoned towns, snow-capped mountains, and a lot more. When I thought the Forza Horizon series couldn't get any better, Playground Games came up with some of the most bold changes that I've ever seen that made Horizon 5 one of the best racing games of all time. Of course, in my opinion, the game is just filled to the brim with exciting content, and it's even more fun with friends. Now, if you love co-op games, there's a good chance you've already played this game, but if you just haven't, this is your chance to do so. This game is now one of the best co-ops on Game Pass. A Way Out is by far one of the most brilliantly designed co-op games where you play as two inmates who find themselves working together to break out of prison. Despite being total strangers, they have to trust each other as their freedom hangs in the balance, and one wrong move can make the entire plan fall apart. Now, I love how this game plays out like a movie in a super fun and immersive way. It's really unlike any other co-op adventure that's out there and that I've personally seen in a long time. The game can be played either online or in split screen mode, and it's definitely worth putting on your list if you're just looking for that great co-op experience. Now, I think this list could definitely use some gore and blood and just some Halloween fun. Game Pass has the title we need here in Dead by Daylight. This is an exciting multiplayer 4v1 horror game where you can choose to become a murdering psychopath trying to eliminate 4 other players as those guys try to survive. The game features some dark killing grounds where survivors must work together to escape the evil clutches of that savage killer, and that killer could be you. Something that I love the most about this game is that it really draws its inspirations for the killers from popular horror movies and TV shows, and each of these killers have their own unique skills and abilities, and so do the survivors as well. It's really one of the most unique and still extremely popular multiplayer games to this day, despite the fact that it released a long time ago, and it's just one of those that I've gotten to actually spend myself hundreds of hours, so I absolutely vouch for this one. Now, I'm going to be honest, there haven't been a lot of good games to play in the 3D platformer space, but Psychonauts 2 is that once in a blue moon game that is just exceptionally fun to play. Sequel to the popular Psychonauts title, the game continues the wild adventure of Raz, a young psychic on a quest to find the mole in the Psychonauts headquarters. Despite its colorful look and quirky characters, the game holds dark secrets and mysterious conspiracies that unravel as the player progresses through the cinematic platform adventure that's absolutely filled to the brim with strange characters and supernatural powers. It's the perfect grab bag for those craving the unexpected, and it's one of those that if you guys are huge on platformers, this is going to be the game to play. Now, the Watch Dogs series over its time has been a good one in gaming, but Watch Dogs 2 is a good one. This is an action open world title that takes hacking to the next level. The player assumes a role of Marcus Holloway, who has embarked on this wild adventure to fight a cyber war against a major crime corporation that is manipulating the minds of the masses using an invasive operating system. Now, I know it's been a while since the game has released. That was back in 2016, but I gotta say it definitely deserves to be on this list in case you missed out on what I think is a pretty amazing title. You'll be joining this notorious group of hackers called DedSec, and you're gonna change the course of the future using your brilliant hacking skills, and of course tons of weapons, and there's tons of missions and side missions. This is a great open world game, and one that I gotta say is a pretty high quality one even in 2023. Now, coming from the creators of the highly acclaimed title Planescape Torment, Tides of Numenera is a single player role-playing game set in Monty Cook's Numenera. It's a rich story-driven adventure that really draws its inspiration from its predecessor in terms of the game's philosophical perspective. Although pretty weird by today's standards, the game manages to really grasp your attention with its deep-rooted story that almost feels personal the deeper you dive. I mean, that's the best way I could explain it. You play as the last cast-off and empty shell for the changing god, and your only task in this dark and dreadful world is to escape an ancient creature called Sorrow. With a high Metacritic score of 81, I definitely think this is worth checking out, even though maybe it's a little more obscure game on this list. Now, Death's Door has to be one of the most unique games ever created. The game puts you in the shoes of a warrior crow on a mission to capture a stolen soul in the world untouched by death. And what's interesting is the creatures often outlive their expiration. Explore this unknown realm and fight your way through the challenges as you try to find the desperate culprit who has stolen your own soul. I love the bleak yet detailed world that fits perfectly well with the overall gameplay of the game. The combat here also feels super impactful, super smooth, which makes slaying through the enemies that much more fun. Death's Door comes jam-packed with tons of fun content combined with a very immersive soundtrack, and guys, I say a beautifully crafted art style, but that might be personal preference. Playing as Alex Chen, Life is Strange True Colors has you peeking into the minds of others using her psychic power of empathy as she tries to figure out the reality behind her brother's so-called accidental death. True Colors is a brilliantly woven journey of surprising secrets and a lot of dark mysteries hidden in a pretty small town. But guys, it's more than just a game. It's really an emotional ride with moments of joy and sadness that really keeps you hooked into the very end. The game is not without its flaws though, but this new chapter of Life is Strange features a powerful story, rich characters, very tough decisions, and of course strong emotions that are really going to keep you hooked from start to end. Now, Prey is one of those games from Bethesda and Arcane Studios that's been kind of underrated since it came out back in 2017. In this game, you awaken in this mysterious space station only to find everything has gone wrong and the station is completely overrun by hostile aliens hunting you and everyone that's left alive. As always, and maybe somewhat cliche, you're the last hope for humanity. But what makes the game kind of underrated is how well the level design is, the amount of attention to detail, and even the story story that comes together in this action adventure game. Now you're going to do typical things. There's crafting ammo, upgrading skills, things to survive, but the gameplay, despite now being almost 6 years old, would absolutely stand up to today's standards with both a mixture of fast-paced combat, or you can take things stealth and get a lot out of that as well. But the story here has you making tough decisions throughout that'll affect the ultimate ending, as the game does have multiple ways it will finish depending on your choices. Prey is one of those, if you guys are looking for something different and very high quality and you love sci-fi games, this is my recommendation. Now, No Man's Sky is one of those games that has one of the best comeback stories in gaming, with an awful launch and negative reviews all over the internet. We're talking tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands. Hello Games has over the years turned around the ship, and the game present to you now is one of the best sci-fi sandbox experiences you're ever gonna have. A game that's all about vast exploration in the universe where there is no limits. You essentially go out, you fly to planets filled with resources, you'll collect those resources, you'll run into wildlife, even mysterious enemies, all while trying to survive, craft, trade, and even building things to your heart's content. The beauty in this game is the choices. If you love to explore new planets, you have that. If you love seeing new biomes, new wildlife you've never seen or discovered or no one else has discovered, you can just focus on gathering riches and building up vast ships with a crew, or just be a trader and just make nothing but money. And honestly, the entire galaxy you're in is your oyster, but it's also filled with other players who reside in the same universe, wherein theoretically possible you might discover something they found before, or later they'll discover something you found before them. It's easily one of the best games to play in 2023, and one of those that if you love sandbox games, take a look at this one. Now, developer Obsidian Entertainment didn't get as much praise for Outer Worlds when it dropped back in 2020, and what many considered a Fallout alternative, and in some ways it certainly is, especially coming from the makers of Fallout New Vegas. But what you're really getting with this game is Fallout in space, and it's one of those games I've beaten from start to finish that I just could not put down. Now, the game's gunplay and action aren't exactly the best, but it's pretty solid for 2023. What I really enjoyed actually was the crazy story, the wild twists and turns, and what I would say is an extremely memorable cast of characters that join alongside you. Like most of these action adventure RPGs, your decisions will affect the final outcome, and for me it's a truly underrated story without giving out any spoilers. Now, the game comes packed full of companion stories, side missions, and character build up that you can go any way you want with, and at any point you can actually change your build as well, so it's very versatile. You also can do a lot of exploring and checking out some pretty detailed planets. If you guys are into RPGs with a very great story, you're okay with average gameplay, I really think you're gonna find enjoyment out of this one. Now, Hi-Fi Rush is an action adventure rhythm game with some of the most gorgeous visuals that we'll see all year. You play as Chai, a victim of a corporate experiment that goes wrong, but strangely it made you powerful, and you're able to attack with the beat of the music, and that's what Hi-Fi Rush is all about. Attacking enemies will sync with the in-game music, and if you have flair and you have some rhythm with your attacks, you'll activate even more special combos and unique visual flares with your gameplay. Now, throughout your adventure, you'll also be teaming up with friends who are going to help you take down these corporate overlords, who then in sync with them, you unlock even more devastating combos. Now, one thing that stood out to me with this game is the boss battles. My goodness, they are epic, and each level contains a unique boss fight, and you can tell this is where the magic of this gameplay and musical loop will really shine. Hi-Fi Rush is one of those that just recently released on Game Pass. It's a new game in 2023, and one that I couldn't recommend more. And we're finally going to finish off this list from a game coming from the co-creator of Rick and Morty. High on Life is probably going to be the weirdest yet fun looking action adventure game you've ever played. It goes something like this. An alien cartel has invaded your planet to get high on drugs made of humans. Now, it's up to you, a young high schooler, to fight against these deadly aliens, and of course none other than the normal cliche, save humanity. Luckily though, you're not going to be alone in this epic showdown of survival. You have a bunch of talking alien guns at your disposal to take out these nefarious gang of alien goons. I know this game sounds pretty crazy, but then again, High on Life is all about the craziness, having a few laughs, all while saving humanity against a deadly alien cartel with, of course, the help of talking guns. Besides the plot, there's quite a lot to do in this game. There's plenty of side quests and missions and exploration, and of course you'll be making new friends with those guns, and it's one of those that I absolutely love on Game Pass. And if you guys want to check out even more great Game Pass games coming out in 2023, you absolutely want to see the video on the screen.